Look at this, ladies and gents, an end peg at the glebe. This is peg 120. It's got a little bit of form. There was a match won off it, I'm saying 2 weeks ago now. Got a little pot of fish coming in. Can you see that? See that there? Little pot of fish. That's the first little group of fish I've seen while I've been setting up. Maybe there's a few going to come down here during the match. So this is maver match this qualifier. We're at the glebe. All the lakes are in today. A big match, good anglers here. A lot of people have told me I've got half a chance here. So let's run through the approach. I've obviously got that long margin there. Now, this isn't a particularly good lake for fishing feeder or rod and line or anything like that. So it's going to be all about pole fishing. I think I need a decent weight anyway, so I'm going to be fishing up that bank, just there, 14 metres up that bank. And up there we've got, I'm going to start on 6mm hard pellets, but we've got other baits. We've got some big soft expanders there. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But we've got corn, a few dead maggots, and if we're in trouble, I've got plenty of micros in there. So I want to start off by rattling in a few hard pellets, but I think if we need to force a few fish into the area, those micros are going to do a job. Put that back on there, get them out in a minute. So that's where I'm going to start fishing, up that bank. And now I've got some slightly shallower water, little bay, just there, and this little bay there, really close to my fishing position, slightly shallower water, 50 centimetres deep there, and I've got a little area that side. Someone's cut that out for me. Someone's cut that out for me on one of the previous matches, and again, similar sort of depth, 50 centimetres. So I'm thinking, if I'm going to catch a big weight, that's where I'm going to do it, close to my fishing position, late margins. Now, I've got those micros. I think those micros are going to come into play on at least one of those swims. But I've also got my big soft expanders that I like. And I think I'll start feeding them maybe by hand on that left-hand swim. And try and catch on these maybe mid-match. Spoke to Sam Collett, he drew here and won the match off it a couple of weeks ago, and he reckons I might catch a few there mid-match, and then late on the fish will be in that corner there. Right, let's have a look at the rigs, because it's not exactly rocket science. Rig for down the bank, 14 metres, 4x12 rube, little bulk, one dropper, size 16 with a bait band on for fishing hard pellets initially. We'll just whip that off if we need to fish anything different. Rig for the bit in that little bay. This is my bagging rig. Same 4x12 float. Size 12 hook on it for fishing either double corn or one of those big expanders. You see there, I've fished it knotless knot style. Can we get that in? Come on. Knotless knot style. I think that's a really strong knot when we're fishing big hooks for big fish. Big elastic. We don't want to be messing around. They're the only two rigs that I've got set up for proper fishing. And then we've got our little mugging rig set up. Again, a little bait band on there, size 16. Reasonably long length of line. Focus on this is horrendous. Reasonably long length of line between pole tip and float. We might be able to mug a few in the quiet spells when those fish are like drifting around, not really feeding. Got a couple of duplicates set up as well. I've also got a waggler rod set up. Got a bit of calm water over there, so we might have a chance of popping a waggler in and catching a few fish. I don't really want to do that though. I feel that's a bit too negative. I think we're looking for probably over £200 today to do well, so don't want to be fishing like that. We'll see how it goes. Wish me luck. as is always the case on these commercial fishery late spring, early summer matches, there's always the odd mugger to be had early on in a match. The water's flat calm, you've got to keep an eye out. If you can keep a little bit of quiet area in your swim, you're going to have a chance early on, I think. And on this occasion, there was the odd fish, the very odd fish cruising around just before the start of the match. So I thought, get the mugging rig out, have a quick 5-10 minute spell, see if I can catch a fish without putting any bait in the water. It's almost like catching a free fish. And on this occasion, I've seen one fish at about 7 or 8 meters, shipped out, dropped my pellet on top of it, and he's had it straight away. First fish of the day, hooked within probably a minute or two of the match starting. Common theme with fishing long on this peg is the struggles that I'm having with the hedge behind me. There's a hedgerow that's about 4 or 5 meters behind me. It's awkward shipping back, so I'm having problems every time. It's a little gap. I've put a bungee across a gap to try and support my pole in the hedgerow, but as anyone that fishes a pole on a canal or anywhere where there's a hedgerow behind you that's quite tight will know it's difficult shipping back in those situations. So just had to bear with it, sometimes double shipping, sometimes just taking my time when I'm playing a fish and just not let it frustrate me. Now, a word on these glebe fish, they are absolutely fighting fit. They go off like a rocket and they just never know when to give up. Quite often I get anglers talking to me that have never visited the glebe before and they just get done by the fish. They're using elastics that are too soft, lines that are too light, hooks that are too small. They're just not prepared for how hard these fish fight. So if you're visiting the glebe, it's worth gearing up because they fight like stink. Sadly, that first fish was the only fish I've managed to mug. The wind started to get up, put a little bit of ripple on the water, which always pushes the fish a little bit lower. And also, I think being tight in the corner, those fish just didn't feel safe cruising around in such a tight space. So, within 20 minutes, I'm up that right-hand margin. Now, the bottom on this peg, the shelf on this peg, is really steep, really awkward to find an area that is a nice place to fish on for you to present a bait properly. So, about 13-40 metres is an area that's reasonably flat. You have to be really precision with your rig, get your rig in exactly the right place, but it was fishable. Started off here, rattling a few pellets in with a little pole mounted pot, 6mm hard pellets, fishing a hard pellet in a band on that rig set 2 foot deep.
It's not taking long up that right hand margin to start getting indications. Rattling in maybe 15-20 pellets each time, fishing that hard 6mm in a band, start getting indications, little line bites, and then eventually a few fish that we've started to hook properly. The fish aren't exactly massive up this long margin though, small fish by glebe standards, but early on in this match, all I'm looking to do is tick over. I know, or I've got a feeling, that later on is going to be the time where I catch the bulk of my fish. The last 2 hours are going to be massively important. If I can maybe put 60, 70 pound in the net up until that point, I think we're well in the hunt. As I start getting a few more indications of that far margin, I feel like I need to introduce more bait. So the plan of attack, and I love doing this on a lot of venues where I feel the fish need a little bit more feed than just a small pole-mounted pot to catch them. I like to catapult bait over the top as well. So hooking a fish, playing it back, I'll then pick up the catapult, fire in maybe 20 pellets. The aim of those pellets is not to be super tight. I want to get them as tight as possible, not to be mega accurate. I'm looking to just settle a few fish into the area. I've just hooked a fish. Obviously those fish that were in the area would have scattered out the peg. I'm looking to settle a few fish in a rough area, and then I can go in and centralise a few fish around my hook bait with the pole mounted pot. That's the plan. It works quite often on a lot of venues that I go to in a lot of situations. Feeding a lot of bait in a wide area, then centralising them with that little pole mounted pot just makes you more efficient. Now I've got to admit the match wasn't exactly going to plan. The fish up that right hand margin were a little bit on the small side. They were tricky to catch as well. The bottom was really awkward. We were foul hooking a few fish. Just couldn't quite get our rig to sit correctly, and it was just a little bit awkward to fish for very little return. Now I knew that we needed a big weight to win this match. You're going to need over 200 pounds. So time to start feeding those short margins, being a bit more aggressive. I knew from one of my more recent matches, feeding a lot of bait was the key to getting the fish in your swim. So I've been really positive on my left hand short margin swim. A little bit more conservative on my right hand swim, just to give myself somewhere to go if that positive line doesn't kick in. But after being really aggressive on that short swim for maybe 15-20 minutes, halfway through the match, we started seeing activity of fish down there. I knew it was time to fish that short margin swim, see if we can put together a run of big fish. Bait for that left hand margin swim, I'm using those 6mm soft expanders. Really nice soft bait that I think carp absolutely love. I'm feeding them by hand, but also fishing a little pole mounted pot, filling that pot up with the same bait and feeding them over the top of my float. So similar sort of approach as I was feeding up the right hand margin on that long margin. Every time I hook a fish, feed a couple of handfuls of the pellets, gather those fish back in the area, and then fill a little pole mounted pot with those pellets, centralise those fish over the top of my float. That's the plan. Hook bait, 1 or 2 of those big 6mm soft expanders. Size 10 hook, bury the hook in those baits, means I can use a heavy elastic and hopefully land my fish pretty fast. Now, going into the last 90 minutes of the match, we still needed to up the pace. I'd heard that a couple of anglers were catching really well on other lakes, so we needed to increase the stamp of fish, we needed to increase the amount of fish we were catching. I've decided to go and feed loads of micros in that left-hand margin. Feed 4 or 5 big handfuls of bait, almost replicating an angler packing away, so we create a big area of feed. That way, we're going to attract loads of fish in the swim. I know we're going to attract loads of fish. Sometimes that can mean that they're awkward to catch, but by fishing a heavier bait, this time I'm using sweet corn, really heavy bait, sweet corn, 2 grains on the hook, rattling in 15, 20 grains of corn over the top of my hook bait. We've managed to centralise those fish bang on the hook bait, and we're getting indications, we're getting clean bites. The micro pellets, again, after every fish, every time I hook a fish, feeding 1 or 2 nice big fistfuls of bait in that margin to keep those fish happy. I've realised at the glebe, especially later on in the match, at this time of year when the water's warming up, you need to feed bait. These fish absolutely love a large amount of bait in the margins. At this point, I've got a spectator, Tom Edwards, fantastic angler. He's struggling on one of the other lakes, Lake 6. Lake 6 hasn't been fishing well of late. It's one of the better lakes sometimes in these big matches, but just for the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's having a bit of an off period. Tom's probably got 50, 60 pounds. He's decided it's not worth carrying on, and he's come for a little bit of a chat. And he's even remarking on how fast we're getting the fish in. I'm using that really heavy elastic. I think one of the keys at the glebe is to not let the fish get up ahead of speed. So by using a strong elastic, still quite soft, still stretches probably 5, 6, 7, 8 meters, but it gets the fish under control quickly. I know that by using a really soft elastic, one that hasn't got much power behind it, those fish are going to be almost on the far side of the glebe before you know it, and that's when you need to use a puller bung and start stripping elastic back. And I think a heavier elastic does a better job at bringing those fish back. Unfortunately, the margin lines didn't kick off big time like they needed to do. I've ended up with £129, a great day's fishing, but well short of Mikey McMillan's £218 that's won the match and qualified for the big money final. I've ended up winning my lake, going home with some lake money, which has made the day even better. Well done to Mikey. Good luck in the final. For me, I'll try on the next qualifier.